Thanks, Julian. My name is Ray Hill, and I'm your host today. And this is the fourth edition of GemQuest. We've had three previously dealing with diamonds, opals, and garnets. And this one, of course, is on tourmalines. And we're very, very lucky today to have as our guest speakers and expert panel people who are the world's leading experts in the area surrounding the gem mineral tourmalines. And I'm hoping that today you will enjoy what you're going to hear, see, and learn. My co-host is Jolian, who's got beautiful pink slices of tourmaline behind him, so he's easily recognizable. He is the person who makes it possible by letting us use his Zoom platform. Thank you, Jolian. And when he has time, God forbid if that ever happens, he will be archiving all the programs, and they will be available on gemdat.org. So you will be able to, at some point in the future, to review and see the things and the shows that you might have missed if you weren't unable to attend. We have a few bits of housekeeping to deal with at this moment. First of all, we don't want to do that quite yet, Federico, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was making a test, I go out, sorry.
The test is successful.
Thank you.
Sorry.
If we didn't have any kind of technical things, it would be a boring program. At any rate, we have a few little ground rules, and I'm going to put them out to you. Once we get started in a minute or two, we'd like to ask you to blank your video and mute your microphone so that we won't have any distractions for these people who've given up their time to share their knowledge with us tonight. And at the end of each presentation, of which there will be, I hope, 5, possibly 6, there will be a time of 2 minutes or more for questions to the person who's just presented. And at the end, we'll have an open panel for all the people that were on the panels for you to ask questions of them. So if you didn't get a chance to ask a question when the person was finished speaking, save up your questions. And how you get a question in is this. You look in chat at the bottom and you pull up the name Jolian and you send Jolian a chat request for a question. And that way he will make sure that you get priorized to ask the question with your screen and your mic on of the speaker or speakers. So those things laid out, and hopefully we'll reduce the distractions by having everybody blanked out but the speaker. I think we should start forward. Our program today, for those of us who are in the daytime, we'll start off with the world-renowned Brian Savota of Blue Cat Productions, famous for more than What's Hot in Tucson, but definitely well known in many circles for those efforts that he puts in over the last decades. And he will be followed by Jesse Fisher, a geologist, and person who in the past, some 18 years in the past, was associated with the mining and extraction of the world's most interesting fluorites from the Rodgley mine in England. Then he will be followed by Dr. Barbara Dutro, to whom I owe a great apology, because I have a very hyperactive spell check, and it did not want to like her name. And every time I put her name in a message, it came out the wrong way. So my apologies, Barb, to that. And Barb is one of the world's, if not the world's leading expert on tourmalines. She's from Baton Rouge University, and we'll look forward to her presentation. She'll be followed by Dr. Federico Pizzota, famous also for Pegmatite, and he's a professor at the University of Milan in Italy. So he's coming from us late at night. And if he's here, I haven't seen him yet, but Peter Lickberg was supposed to be sharing, but he sent me a message saying they've been having really poor internet strength in where he lives. So I apologize if he doesn't make it. And he's already sent his advance regrets if his internet doesn't allow him to be present. So without any further ado, I'd like to at least introduce briefly our first presenter, Brian Sabota. Now, I asked Brian specifically to be a part of this because his dad, Ed Sabota, is probably, I would call him the godfather of tourmalines, and was the person, if not one of the persons in the world to actually bring the name and the gem tourmaline to the world's attention through his efforts in the mines that he developed in the Southern California. So I'm going to hand the screen over now to Brian and ask everybody else to blank their screens. And please put your view onto speaker view, and then you'll get a better view of what Brian's about to show you. So Brian, without further ado, please welcome Brian Sabota of Blue Cap Productions.
Thank you, Ray. I really appreciate being invited to the show. I wanted to start off today's show by being the first to really thank you for putting this together. In these times of isolation, as we all know, these programs such as GemQuest really helps us to stay informed and to keep us connected to each other. And so you're doing a great service to the community. Thank you very much. Before I start my presentation, I thought it would be a fun little reminder to show how we're kind of randomly connected throughout this community. And so this is actually a photo from 4 years ago yesterday that I wanted to share with everyone. I had received a text from Ray, as I occasionally do, saying that he was in Honolulu and wanted to see if he was available for lunch. I gave him the directions to one of my favorite bars, restaurants near my house, and we had a fantastic afternoon together. Ray, this is to you. So thank you very much, man. Now, I know we're going to spend the rest of the day talking about gemstones, and the story I have to tell is really more about mineral specimens versus gemstones. But what many people may not realize is this story about mineral specimens really has its origins in gemstones. Now, my father, as Ray said, was Edward Sabota, and he was interested in minerals from about, I don't know, about the time that he could walk. And considering that he was born in 1917, I mean, that was a real long time ago. In the early 40s, he spent about 9 years living in Brazil, following his passion for minerals and gemstones. Not long after he returned to America, he started this jewelry company, Sabota Incorporated, as a way to provide a living for himself using all the minerals that he picked up over the years. Now, the company was based in Los Angeles, and so as many things in Los Angeles are touched by Hollywood, my father was no exception. In 1953, he was hired by 20th Century Fox when they were making the film Treasure of the Golden Condor. And here's a kind of a movie poster of the movie that they were working on. And this was starring Cornel Wilde, who was very famous at the time, Constance Smith, and a very young Anne Bancroft. And for those of you who don't know who Anne Bancroft is, she starred in over 87 films and television shows, but was probably most famous for her role as the seductive Mrs. Robinson in the 1967 classic, The Graduate. But going back to the Treasures of the Golden Condor, in the movie, a young adventurer played by Cornel Wilde, and I think I lost the video feed here. There we go. So Cornel Wilde was playing a young adventurer who was in search of the Mayan treasures in the jungles of Guatemala. So you take Guatemala, you take the Mayan treasures, and 20th Century Fox figured they needed an emerald necklace. So they hired my father to make one, and here he is putting that emerald necklace onto the neck of Anne Bancroft. Now, interesting side note here, those stones were real stones, but they weren't emeralds. Those were all green tourmaline, which brings us to our topic for today, tourmalines. One of the mineral finds that my father is so famous for are the spectacular blue cap tourmalines that came out of the Tourmaline Queen mine in the Pala area of northern San Diego County in the early 70s. But the story of the Tourmaline Queen mine actually started with the Stewart lithium mine, which my father had purchased as a way to provide gem cutting materials for his jewelry business. So rather than me telling you the story of how the Stewart led to the Queen mine, which led to the blue cap tourmalines, I'm really going to have my father tell you this story. Now, the footage you're about to see is from an interview I did with my father back in 2009 when he was 92 years old. And this was about 4 years before he passed away. No one has ever seen this footage before, so I'm very happy to share it with you now. So I'm going to put the footage on now, and I hope you enjoy this.
We're talking about the Tourmaline Queen mine that it was by far the biggest producer of fine gem material in the Pala area, excepting that one major pocket that the king had exposed. which were all pinks. I, along with other snoopers or high graders, had entered the Queen mine prior to buying it. And if I remember correctly, it was Montemore that was in charge of keeping the mine posted in condition so that no one would have suit to bring against him for accidents and so on. We entered into negotiations on the purchase, and it was the final of 3 purchases that I made in the Pala area. And the first was the steward, and then the second was the chief, and this was now the third. Before buying the property, I asked permission to investigate the underground, and I was given permission. And so and I think I hiked in from the steward to following an old wagon trail to get there. And there was the entryways were with caved in blocks of pegmatite and so on. And I finally found what I thought was the best way to explore the underground. And with a hard hat and a flashlight, there I went. And I recall quite vividly going in a tunnel, and then there were several adits off to one side, and I found that there was one passageway going down through the fractured area of the pegmatite, which is in a step-like manner. And the evidence was that in the ceiling were stubs of large black tourmaline that I found out later was a very important indicator for pocket discovery in the Queen. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be anywhere else. But in the Queen, if a black tourmaline has a diameter of over about 3/4 of an inch, then it could be close to pocket material. And there are many areas where the black tourmaline occurs like 3/4 of an inch or under, and it means nothing insofar as discovery of pocket area. But these pockets, these tourmalines were 1.25 1.5 inches in diameter. And that meant that, yes, that was a pocket where the tunnel had been driven through there, and they were in quest of the fine tourmalines at that time. On this back tunnel that I'd been investigating to try to determine what the signs on the walls and the ceiling meant, I found one area that had indicators of pocket, which consist of the violet purple mica called lepidolite, and the feldspar in the form of Clevelandite, which is Clevelandite actually is the most important indicator in the Tourmaline Queen mine for proximity of pockets. And so I had found signs of that on the north wall of the deepest tunnel to the west. So I made a mark there, and then keeping that in mind, I wormed my way out through the broken and sliding slabs of pegmatite and backfill from the high graders to get to the surface, and eventually talk to the agent that I would be interested in buying the property. 2 days before we returned from Brazil, John finally came upon after having gone through like 25 feet of very solid, tough pegmatite with no signs whatsoever, he came upon a little strip of lepidolite in the face that showed up in the face of the tunnel. There was something about that lepidolite that was quite different from any other lepidolite. And it's something that I had learned in Brazil as being a very strong, hot kind of a sign of pockets nearby. And that was that the lepidolite, in place of being the normal violet into purple, was more of a pinkish violet. And I've never had any information on the chemistry that would make that happen, but those pinkish violet lepidolite are extremely close to pockets in Brazil. And so I assumed, well, this could be very good coming up. And so I told John to shoot a short charge at an angle that brought us almost due north from the direction we were going, and it only penetrated about 3 feet, but it'd be safer to do that because if pockets were present, we wouldn't destroy anything. And lo and behold, it worked out just right because the charge had broken away just enough of the rock that it exposed a pocket. And the first evidence of this pocket turned out to only reveal about a foot or so of pocket material, and then there's a massive amount of quartz and feldspar that had built over in the rear of the pocket, and we thought, well, that's the end of the pocket. And so we had John put in a very short, like half sticks, quarter sticks of dynamite to pop out certain obstructions that would make us, give us the opportunity to look beyond and see what was happening. And I had come down from Los Angeles area to excitedly be part of digging out those first crystals. And I was exhausted, and I got home, and by I not no more than reached home, then I got a phone call, and they said, John has popped out and opened it. It's still a bigger pocket behind. The contents of this pocket were, in our estimation, remarkable. And it gave Bill and me each a chance. And this was still my property. It wasn't in the hands of Pala Properties. I'd leased the properties to Pala Properties for $1 a year. And so I had the first pick. And so I picked what we built, dreamt up the name as well dreamt as rabbit ears. And that was the crystal, the specimen that I adored most of all. That was a joyous period for us because it was just before Tucson, and it turned out to be like the major talk of the show that this pocket had been discovered. And we had what we thought were the top prices that these specimens at that time could stand. And I think the one, the most expensive one, well, I think was $20,000. And of course, it's a couple more zeros that go onto that nowadays because prices are so high. Well, my reaction to the blue cap was nothing but delight because it was a beautiful combination of shades of tourmaline, and I've seen some pretty amazing colors in Brazil, but this was firsthand in America, and it was really exciting to find a blue of such intensity. And we were I can't remember exactly, but we were dancing and jumping around and screaming and doing all kinds of things because it was such an exciting find. The popularity, or I should say the notoriety of the blue cap was probably due to the fact that we got so many out of this one pocket. The pocket was so extensive that we got out lots and lots of specimens, all of which were the same orderly progression of colors and into the termination of that beautiful blue. And for the very fact, if we'd just taken out one or two, it wouldn't have had that kind of an impression or effect. But by having like 20 or 30 crystals, all of which have that same color, it's like a new race of tourmaline is born, sort of thing.
And so that's kind of the end of the presentation. There is a video online there at mineralfilms.com/Ed Sabota, where you can actually see more stories of this. Bill tells a little bit of it also. And for those wondering, that $20,000 highly priced blue cap at that time now sits in the Smithsonian Museum, and that was the candelabra. So so that's pretty much the story, or at least a shortened, abridged story of the blue cap tourmalines coming out of Pala.
Thanks so much, Brian. And I'd open up the floor for a few minutes. If anybody here has any questions, please feel free to let it be known to Jolyon, and we'll gladly entertain your questions.
I sort of have a question for Mike. If let me turn the tables for a sec. So my father said $20,000, and you can add a couple more zeros. I don't know if you could even talk about this, but my guess is the candelabra is valued in the 7, potentially 8-figure frame now. So I don't know if that's something that you can talk about or what, but I don't think anyone would really disagree with that.
Yeah, I can talk about it. It'll be a very short conversation. we don't, for something like that, we don't have a value on it. For us, it's considered priceless because if something were to happen to it, we could never replace it. So yeah, I mean, you can say 7 million, 70 million, 700 million if you'd like. But I don't know how you would even begin to put a value on something like that.
Let's say 7 billion and just make it a more exciting story.
Yeah, and then we'd have to increase our security in the museum then.
Oh, okay, maybe a bad idea.
Yeah, how about $7?
$7, there you go. Nobody wants it, but ooh, it's pretty to look at.
Yeah.
I still get a thrill whenever I'm down there, out there, I should say, to wander over and to check it out. It's just, even for me, it moves me.
It's amazing how many people, when they come to that part of the museum, just stop and stare at it and photograph it. I mean, it is clearly one of our iconic pieces, there's no question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dad.
Wish we could. Thanks very much, Brian. And thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, I'd like to move forward.
Yeah, we've got one question coming through. So hold on a second. Trying to. Okay, well, the question was, is there any chemical or any other test that can be used to determine where Albite came from?
I'm not the person to answer that. If
No.
anybody here would, I'd say it would be Federico.
Or Barb.
Or Barb, yes, I'm sorry, certainly.
Yeah.
I'll just quick take that. It's a very difficult and challenging problem, but we're developing some statistical methods to try to separate We can separate periebas from different localities. So that's some of the things we're currently working on. And they're a type of Albite. So it takes a large data set and it's very difficult to do, but there's some potential out there.
Barb, for the periebas, is it the chemical compound or is it inclusions that allows you to differentiate the origin?
It's the chemistry.
Wow, that's really cool.
We're using laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. We're using multi-component, so we have about 13,000 spectra for each tourmaline grain. So we use those chemistries.
Out of respect for those who happen to be the miners in Paraíba in Brazil, that I think they sort of want to be like the French with their wines. They don't want anybody else to use the term and call everything else Cuprian, but whatever. It's one of those delicate areas we have to trot it carefully in, I think. Well, thank you very much for your questions and your comments. And thank you very much, Brian, for sharing your dad with us, because I think your dad was a very key figure in the evolution of the world's understanding and appreciation of tourmalines. Although they existed before him and they still exist after him, I think he was a key player in making them popular. Our next presenter is, thank you, Brian. Our next presenter is a person that's very well known to people who frequented the Inn Suites in Tucson during Tucson show, and for many years, Jesse Fisher was in the room there helping to sell the amazing Rogerly fluorites. But that is an era that is now ended in terms of his involvement. He's moved on, and I am actually very excited to see where he's moved in the world of music. Both he and his wife are extremely good musicians, but I don't think we're going to be lucky enough to experience that now. What I've asked Jesse to do, and I know he's going to do a very good job on it, is to share with us and help us understand the structure and the presentation of gem minerals in pegmatites. And I think he's particularly going to be using those from California as his model. And without any further ado, I'd like you please to be welcoming of Jesse, and please blank your screens and your microphones to let him be the predominant, and put your view into speaker view, please. Please, Jesse, you're on now.
Okay, Ray. Everybody hearing me okay there? Yes? No?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we can hear you
Okay,
fine.
good. Good. Okay, let's see if I can get this screen share up and running here. And let's see, there it is. And there we are. Okay. Ray has asked me to talk about where gem tourmaline comes from. And now, when we're talking about tourmaline, Barb tells me there are 38 recognized species by the IMA at this moment, most of which are black little uglies and don't qualify as gem material at all. When we think about gem tourmaline, what we're usually thinking about is Albite and, to a lesser extent, not lepidolite, well, what's the name? Lidocodite, there we go. And these minerals come almost exclusively from granitic pegmatites. Now, so what is a pegmatite? Basically, a pegmatite is a vein or dike-shaped body of rock that is oftentimes very coarsely grained and has a composition pretty much the same as your average granite. It's dominated by quartz, feldspars, and micas. This is a photograph of a cross-section of the Himalaya pegmatite that I took, 35 years ago, something like that. But these rocks are basically the end product of the crystallization and the solidification of a granitic magma, a pluton or a batholith, as it were. Classification-wise, there are numerous different types of pegmatites depending upon their geologic setting and and the chemistry involved, and this determines the minerals that you end up with. But the ones that we're interested in are classified as the LCT type, which means they're generally enriched in lithium, cesium, and tantalum minerals. And these are the pegmatites, which for the most part give us the gem tourmalines that we all know and covet. So where do these things occur? Granitic Plutons are the result of the partial melting of subducted oceanic crust. So they occur in both present and former active continental margins, where the crust is pulled down into the mantle, part of it melts. Being crustal material, it's very rich in volatiles, particularly water. And so these melted bodies migrate upwards into mountain ranges, which were probably original continental volcanic arcs. You can think of places like that currently on the planet would be Japan, the Aleutian Islands, Indonesia, former areas where we now find these pegmatites, or places like Southern California, Pakistan, Afghanistan, parts of Africa and such. Now, when the granitic magma starts to solidify, crystallize, cool, the minerals form in a definite sequence. The early on minerals, which we call the mafic minerals, the calcium-bearing feldspars, olivine, pyroxenes, amphiboles, biotite, these minerals all selectively remove the mafic elements, the iron, magnesium, and calcium. So as the granite crystallizes and these minerals are pulled from the residual melt, the melt becomes more felsic. It becomes dominated by lighter colored minerals. And in this residual, you get a concentration of what are called the misfit elements that aren't taken up by these standard minerals that have been crystallizing. And in the case of the LCT type pegmatites, these will include lithium, beryllium, boron, and fluorine, and of course the water, the volatiles that end up being concentrated as well in the remaining melt. Now, when you get a high degree of crystallization and cooling of the granite, this residual fluid, which is now very, very volatile and water rich, to form the pegmatites, what will happen is that it'll pretty much exceed the confining pressure, fracture the rock, and migrate into the surrounding country rock around the pegmatite. And you tend to get a sort of a zonation in the chemistry as you move further away from the granitic body. Close in, you get what are called barren or simple pegmatites, which are just quartz, feldspar, and micas. As you move a little further out, you get beryllium containing minerals, aquamarines, and as you continue to evolve, you get the lithium and beryllium and cesium bearing minerals, and that's where you get the colored tourmalines, you get your spodumines, you get your morganites, things like that. Okay, this is a diagram that was originally developed by the late Dr. Gene Ford of an idealized cross-section of the Himalaya pegmatite in Southern California. And as you can see, the zonation is very asymmetric in these pegmatites, these complex pegmatites. And in the lower portions, you have a sugary textured apelite zone, which again is primarily quartz and feldspars with some micas, perhaps garnets, schorls, things of that nature. And as the pegmatite tends to cool and solidify, you get a continuing concentration of the volatile components. And at a certain point, this volatile component, this aqueous phase, exsolves from the residual silicate magma, and you form well, hopefully you can form a pocket zone. And in this pocket zone, you have the ability for freestanding crystals to form. And that's where we get our nice gem crystals from, the tourmalines, the morganites, the spodumines, quinzites, things of that nature. But this process is also a rather cruel part of nature, in that if these crystals are going to survive, the pocket has to rupture at a certain point and vent these residual fluids. Otherwise, they will continue to evolve as the temperature lowers, and they'll convert into micas and clays and things like that. But in the rupturing process, it's like taking a hammer and twirling it around inside the pocket. Everything's broken up and jumbled. And so what you're left with is a clay-filled pocket with usually a bunch of broken crystals scattered around inside. This is a photo of a pocket in the San Diego mine, which adjoins the Himalaya, that Gene Ford took when he was doing his research there. And you can see a lot of very nice gemmy tourmalines there in the clay. And this is another photo of a gem pocket. This one was taken by the late Josie Scripps in the Tourmaline Queen mine sometime in the early to mid 1970s. And you can see some very, very nice big tourmaline crystals and a morganite and such, all embedded in a jumble of rock fragments and pocket clays. And while I know the focus on this talk is probably going to be mostly about gem materials rather than the mineral specimens, all of these nice, big, fantastic specimens like the Smithsonian has and Houston has and a lot of private collectors have been pretty much reconstructed out of all of the material that's collected out of these pockets. Very few of them tend to come out intact, such as this one. This was a very nice cluster of tourmaline and feldspars that were recovered in the later stages of the operation at the Himalaya mine down in San Diego. And it looks quite nice, but for the most part, all of those tourmalines have been put back onto the matrix, and the matrix has been put together from a number of different pieces. And this is just what happens. So in closing, if anybody wants to pursue the topic of what pegmatites are, what they're made up of, and where they come from, this is recommended reading here. Pegmatology by Skip Simmons and his former group there at the University of New Orleans. Okay, I guess that's quick. Ray wanted about 10 minutes. I think that's what we've got here. If anybody's got a question, stop share. There we go.
Is it fair to say, Jesse, that very few specimens that come out of tourmaline pockets are unrepaired?
Most of the bigger ones are repaired. I think it's one of the things that I find absolutely incredible about the Afghani pegmatites is there are so many specimens that seem to come out intact. Most of the ones that I know of from San Diego and Brazil and other famous locations have been pretty much repaired.
Yeah, the Pedernera is I think is one of the more famous ones of those, where they have very long, skinny crystals, and they look really dramatic, but they've all been very carefully pieced together.
Oh God, I can't imagine how much time goes into sitting there and picking through all the pieces and putting those things back together. It must be months, if not years, to get one of those things put back together. They're truly incredible.
Yeah, there's a dealer in the in-suites who calls himself MIB. I always thought it was Men in Black, but it's mining in Brazil. And this guy, his primary goal is to find electrolytically or electric industry quality shore oil. But in the process, he's gone through a lot of the very famous mines. He said whenever they hit a pocket, they had to get rid of all the miners, and then he and the foreman will go in and try and piece together all the crystals, because that was the only way they knew whether or not anything had been stolen.
It's how mining is, how it always has been, and it probably always will be. The miners are always looking for that bonus.
Are there any other questions? I think that's a very interesting topic.
I'm sure Mike can correct all the numerous errors I've made in all of this. It's sort of the cliff notes of what a pegmatite is.
Yeah, we don't have time for that.
Okay.
But I just want to make a comment for those who are attending this webinar who are not familiar with pegmatites. Jesse mentioned a very important factor that occurs in a lot of pocket pegmatites, and that is that those crystals are often broken. I want to just add that pocket pegmatites in general are very, very rare. When you look at all the number of pegmatites globally, they probably make up less than 0.1% of all pocket pegmatites. And so then to have pockets that produce gem quality material makes it even rarer. So people who aren't familiar with pegmatites should realize that we're talking about a really special event in the formation of pockets in pegmatites and subsequently gem minerals in pockets.
Yeah, this is quite true. I'd say probably 95, if not 99% of the pegmatites that occur anywhere in the world are simple, non-complex, non-pocket containing pegmatites. So these things truly are a geological rarity.
Is it possible to surmise from the comments that both of you made that the gem pegmatites of the world are almost all somewhere in proximity to fault zones?
They are, because of their relationship with mountain building and the creation of granitic batholiths, they are all in areas that at some time in geologic history have been active continental margins. So you're going to have faulting, subduction, volcanism, all that kind of fun stuff. And you can, like I mentioned, areas where that's going on today, like Japan and the Aleutians and Indonesia. You can think of those as potential sources for pegmatites millions of years in the future when they've been uplifted and eroded to the point where we can actually get at them.
Because the only gem tourmaline mine in Canada happens to be not that far from a continental join in the Ottawa Valley, which is a rift. So, and I look at the west coast here, not that far from the fault zone there too. So it's kind of, I thought there, from the sound of things, there might be some kind of connection, but you're right.
Oh, definitely there is. What you had in the geologic past, I'm not sure exactly the age, maybe 30 million years or so. You had a subduction zone off California coast down in what's now Southern California. The spreading center that drives the plate creation, which is then subducted under a continent, was overridden by the continent, and it's moved north. So you only having subduction up off of Oregon and Washington and British Columbia now. But formerly that was what was happening down in Southern California as well. And
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. Thank you also, Mike, for throwing in some extra clarifying commentary. I appreciate that very much. And hope you feel free to do that again if we need you. So moving on, we'd ask everybody to blank their screens again and to
blank the screen. Technical issue. You just hit stop video. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Stop video. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Will do.
So, and please make your screens speaker view. And I'd like to introduce, oops, where are we here? Okay. It's already jumped the gun there.
I did. I beat you to it.
We have a very exciting next person. Not that anyone else before you wasn't exciting, but you're dealing with a broad palette here and looking at the species and colors in tourmaline. And this is like the candy cane of mineral crystals. It's just so colorful and zoned. And I'm looking very much forward to hearing what you have to say. And because it looks like, unless I can be proven otherwise, that we might be missing Peter Lickberg, we actually have a little bit of extra time. So if Peter shows up or if he's here, he needs to let me know. But if not, then you have a little bit of extra time, Barb, in case you need it.
He's not at the
Right?
moment.
So thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for taking the time to put together this presentation. Please welcome Barb Dutro, professor and specialist in tourmalines.
Thank you very much. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to talk about one of my favorite minerals, tourmaline. So let's make sure I can get this to move ahead. And now, okay, here we go. So we know tourmaline is an important gemstone, as Jesse just said. When they're made in these fantastic pegmatites, we can then mine them, and they've become important gemstones in part because of the wide range of their unrivaled spectrum of colors, from these pastel pinks to these saturated greens to these intense neon blues. And these gemstones are cut from very large, flawless crystals that have exceptional clarity, again, making them fantastic gemstones. In addition, tourmaline is quite hard. It ranks at 7.5 on Mohs scale of hardness, so it can be set into a ring or a necklace or an earring. Well, tourmaline has long been used as a gemstone, so I thought I'd take you back in history a bit, and two famous examples are shown here. On the left is St. Wenceslaus' crown. It was fashioned in the mid-14th century for the Emperor Charles IV. The large stone in the center of the crown is tourmaline. And of course, from the gem pegmatites in California, we all know the Chinese Dowager Empress was very fond of pink tourmaline, and that's shown in her crown here. And she was partly responsible for the popularity of the California pink tourmalines, from which she acquired a considerable amount. In about the early 1900s, they mined over 120 tons of pink tourmaline from the San Diego pegmatites. And today, tourmaline is still used. Some more contemporary stones are shown here. We have two beautiful purple-violet tourmalines that are both copper-bearing tourmalines from Mozambique. And then we have an indicolite, although the color looks more green here, that's a beautiful gem quality tourmaline from Namibia. Well, tourmaline gemstones also span a very large range in prices, from the Brazilian Paraíba tourmalines, which are the most expensive on the market, and depending on their size, they can be up to $50,000 a carat for their this deep color as well as their clarity. And then of course we go to the opposite end of the color spectrum and we get to black tourmalines, which are the least expensive of the tourmaline species, and they can probably sell for, I don't know, $1 a carat or something like that. The largest faceted tourmaline gemstone that's a Paraíba or a Paraíba-like, and I'll talk about that a bit later if you'd like me to, is a nearly 200 carat faceted stone shown here. It's part of a necklace, which I can't even imagine the weight if you actually wear this necklace. So I think it looks much better on a model here. So Paraíba is a varietal name used for tourmaline. These are tourmalines that are colored by copper and in some cases manganese. And the name Paraíba has been determined while Paraibas do occur in Brazil, and that was the state in which they were first found, the Laboratory Harmonization Committee has said that any tourmaline that's colored by copper and manganese can be called Paraiba, and we can debate that later, but that's what the lab committee says. So that's a varietal name, but what I've been asked to talk about today are tourmaline species. So most Paraibas form in Albaites. They're fluoroalbaites as the actual tourmaline species, and in some cases they're fluoroliticotites, which are much more rare, but they are found in Mozambique. So we're going to take a quick tour now to tourmaline species. So tourmaline itself is a mineral supergroup. It was considered a group, but because there are so many species in the mineral group, it's called a supergroup. So what is a species? Each species of a mineral has an ideal chemical composition that we show as a chemical formula, and it also has a particular crystal structure. So all of these tourmaline species have a general structure that is that of the tourmaline supergroup. And of course, you're familiar with some of these species, Albite, schorl, and dravite, which are some of the more common species. But how do we get those names? Okay, so we're going to look very briefly at the general chemical formula for tourmaline. And this is idealized. So bear with me just a little bit and you're all going to become crystallographers by the end of this talk. Okay, so we have the general chemical formula is given here at the top, and you're like, wow, these are weird letters. They don't relate to a chemical element, but that's because we just show them as general or idealized. So that's X, Y, Z, T, B over here for boron, one of those misfits of the undesirable elements that Jesse just talked about, which is key to tourmaline forming. And then this V and W site, which are special because they have negatively charged ions. So as we move toward this O for oxygen, the different what we call sites in the crystal structure decrease in size. So X is the largest, followed by Y, Z, T, and then B, okay? So the nice thing about this is tourmaline is obviously complex, but we can think of the different sites in the crystal structure as being houses for chemical elements. So chemical elements like to snugly fit inside of their houses. And all of these houses are basically different shapes of polyhedra. So the X site here, the largest site, is just the right size for elements like sodium, calcium, potassium to fit inside. And sometimes the X site can also be vacant. The Y site likes to contain magnesium, iron, and lithium, sometimes a little bit of aluminum. So it's just the right size for those chemical elements. And that's shown by this dark purple. The lighter purple represents the house for the Z site cations, those that are primarily aluminum, magnesium, and sometimes chromium, vanadium, and a different valent state of iron. Then this tetrahedral site is typically, it's the pink sites that all point down in one direction. It usually contains only silica and sometimes a little bit of aluminum. Our B is our boron site for the key component that tourmaline needs to form. And then we have these two sites, the V and the W, that are both for negatively charged ions instead of all of these that are positively charged. So they're hydroxyl oxygens, and then the W site is the unique place for fluorine to fit. So you can see by this large number of chemical elements that can occur in the tourmaline crystal structure that you can make many different combinations of these. So when a majority of one site has one chemical element, then that can be a new species. So hence, we can have a lot of species. So here's just a diagram or a table of a few of the select tourmaline gem species. So to date, there have been 38 species of the tourmaline supergroup that have been accepted by the International Mineralogical Association. And several of the members today are on that commission. So Federico, I know he's on it. So he can also speak to this. So here are our general sites for the crystal structure. Again, big site going progressively smaller, and then not much exciting happens in the T, B, and V site, so we kind of ignore those. So now we can look at the different species, the chemical species. So the most common that Jesse talked about and that you've seen in most gemstones is Albite from Elba, Italy. It has sodium, lithium, and aluminum, and then mostly hydroxide, but there's also a fluoroalbite, which has the W site with a majority of fluorine. So two related species are Rossmanite and Daryl Henryite. They just have different proportions of lithium and aluminum, or a different, in this case, it can have a vacancy or it can be an oxy end member. Dravite's another common gem-forming tourmaline species. It differs from Albite by having magnesium in the Y site. And then chrome dravite, which is often that beautiful saturated green, has chromium in the Z site. Schorl, the least exciting of the gem tourmaline species, I would guess, although I like fancy blacks, is the iron-bearing sodium tourmaline schorl. And we can't forget the fluoroliticotites. Those are those spectacular gemstones from Madagascar that I'm sure Federico will talk about a bit later. And it has calcium in the X site, lithium and aluminum, and then fluorine in the W site. So anytime you change the majority of elements or the majority occupancy of an element in a crystal site, you can get a new species. Okay. So Albites are the most common of the gem species, and that's shown, and Albites can occur in a wide range of colors as shown here by this tourmaline bracelet. So the pinks on this end are all Albites. There's green Albites here in the center. There's some bluish colored Albites here, and then a few more pinkish purple ones at the end. Also shown on this bracelet are liticotites, so those are our calcium lithium minerals. And then there's two dravites in here, these kind of orangey brown colored tourmalines. But what was most interesting when we had fun gathering the chemical composition of all of the tourmalines in this bracelet is the fact that there were two imposters. Who knew? So here's two yellow quartzes, citrine, hiding it amongst this very expensive tourmaline bracelet. So you can see that the gem species of Albite has many colors, even though it's a single chemical species. So you've probably seen many of these varietal names, such as acroite, which typically refers to a colorless tourmaline. And because Albite is composed of sodium, lithium, aluminum, none of those cause color in a mineral, so it's usually trace elements that do, but you can have colorless tourmalines. Indicolite is that beautiful teal blue. Rubellite can be your raspberry reds. Verdilite or chrome are your greens, and then periebas, those neon blues or purples or greens colored by copper, are Albites, fluoroalbites, or liticotites. So although we don't change the species, just small changes in the chemical elements can result in this very wide range of colors in a single species. But the opposite is also true. It's very hard to determine species based on a color, because one color can also be many species. So now let's look at green tourmalines. So here's that example of a beautiful, deep, saturated green tourmaline in a ring. Now, it could be a dravite with a little bit of iron coloring it, or it could be one of its 9 relatives, a chromium dravite, a vanadium, a vadano oxydravite, an elbaite, or a schorl. So each of these different, again, chemical species has a different chemical element as the majority component of each of these sites. So colors can sometimes be deceiving. This tourmaline ring here happens to be colored by vanadium. It has about 645 parts per million vanadium. So we love tourmalines, again, because they have this wide range of color. It's probably the widest range of any mineral, including sapphires. The coloring is caused by trace amounts of a component in the mineral. So it can be a single component, or it can be caused, the color can be due to the interactions of different chemical elements in the mineral. So we've just put the causes of color on this bracelet to show you the many different opportunities for color to occur in a gem tourmaline. So we can not only have a wide range of color in many different tourmaline crystals, we can also have many different colors in a single tourmaline crystal. And when small chemical changes occur in the growth medium of the tourmaline, and as Jesse just said, it may be a fluid phase, which then concentrates certain elements, you can get changes in the color in a single crystal. And I suspect Federico will show you some of these spectacular fluorolithicotite slabs from Madagascar, from the Angibanino pegmatite. So this is a single tourmaline crystal. This is in the Harvard Mineral Collection. You can see the nice hexagonal outline and the trigonal crystal form of this mineral. And just small changes in the titanium or the iron or the manganese can cause these beautiful color zones to occur. And tourmaline is very stable in its geologic environment. So once it incorporates these chemical signatures, it doesn't let go of them. So you have these sharp boundaries at the edges of these chemical zones. Another example of a slab of tourmaline is shown here with that beautiful sapphire orange color to it. Chemical zoning in tourmalines can also be used, is popular in gemstones. So shown on the left are some of the tourmalines we call watermelon tourmalines, because they, if you cut them parallel to the long axis of the crystal, you have a pink core, like Julian's background, or Julian's background. You have a white rim followed by a green rim. And this is a pin and then 2 earrings to match. Sometimes the tourmalines are color zoned along the axis of the crystal. In this case, it's that raspberry red to that colorless zone to these beautiful teal blues. And this is the famous bicolored steel from the Pedernera mine that undoubtedly took much time to reconstruct. And this is another example of the incredibly intricate zoning that can occur in a tourmaline slice. In some cases, even the Paraíba tourmalines can be color zoned. This is a purple and blue watermelon tourmaline. So it has this blue or this purple core surrounded by this almost teal blue rim, surrounded by yet another growth zone that's very, very green in color. So you also know that this is an unheated specimen of Paraíba because it contains these different color zones. Other Paraíba tourmalines that aren't so expensive are shown here. Some of these are in the matrix, so this would be what Jesse just talked about. They form in beautiful pegmatites, most Albaites do. Here's mostly quartz. Here's some Clevelandite or feldspar on the edge. we have the tourmaline that has almost a pink core to it, surrounded by the copper blue tourmaline, and then overgrown at the latest growth stage by these dark black, this dark black rim. So this is across the length of the tourmaline, and this is down the axis of the tourmaline. So in summary, I'll just remind you that tourmaline is a mineral supergroup with 38 different species. You don't have to know them all by the end of this talk. You just need to know 2, at least Albite and Dravite. So each species has an ideal chemical composition that we represent by that chemical formula. And each of these different species is characterized by a specific chemical elements that occupy the specific crystallographic site. So when a majority of chemical elements, or some slight rules there might change, occupy a specific site, we can get a new species. And there are all sorts of regulations and rules as to how you do a species with IMA. So the most common for gem-bearing tourmalines are Albites, Dravites, and fluoroliticotites. Most gem tourmalines are Albites. They occur in this incredibly large range of colors because of trace elements that they can incorporate. So you can have many colors in one species, or you can have one color in many species. But tourmalines make fantastic gemstones, and if you're lucky like me to study them, I like to wear what I study, so it's perfect. And shown here is one of my favorite tourmalines, which is not at all gemmy. It's a fibrous tourmaline, and these are pink fibers from a mine in Brazil. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. My email address is shown here. And for any tourmaline lovers in the audience, we are very much hoping that the 3rd tourmaline conference will happen in 2021 in person on Elba Island, and you can view the website there. So thank you very much. Those are my extra slides if I had time. So I'm not sure if I went over or under, so I'll stop my screen share.
No, you can actually go on with your extra slides, Barb.
Ah, okay. Did I talk too fast?
No, I don't know. You covered a very technical subject, so you had a lot of ground to cover.
Okay, I'll reshare my screen real quickly. Okay. So these were just a couple other tourmalines that I added here. These are inclusions that occur along the specific crystallographic planes. And as you cut through the crystal, you can see these different growth zones. And these are basically green dravites that are quite attractive. Okay. And then in some cases, gems tourmalines are also cat's eye. So the cat's eye is not as sharp as in some of the other gemstones because the hollow tubes that basically make this fibrous looking appearance are larger than in some of the crystal barrels. So your eye on the tourmaline is a bit larger. Okay. Okay. So I'm happy to take any questions. And I know that you're all now experts on tourmaline. I'll be happy to answer questions or review whatever you would like.
Julian, do you have any questions?
Brian's got a question. So I don't know if Brian, you want to jump in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Julian. Barbara, I'm curious as to where within the range the new tourmaline falls that was named after you.
Oh, Brian, thank you. So the tourmaline that I have named after me is a sodium iron titanium oxy tourmaline. So the chemical formula has sodium in the X site, but in the Y site, it has iron and titanium. And those two chemical elements react to make it black. And then there's oxygen occupying the W site. So thank you.
Absolutely. And let me have a follow-up question, if I may. Where was that found, and is that the only location where it's known to come from?
Currently, that is the only location. It was found in the Apuan Alps of Italy. We're actually really hoping to get to Tourmaline 2021 because I've been promised a field trip to that locality.
Oh, that would be brilliant.
It's in a metamorphosed rhyolite, so it's a very unusual It's a very unusual geologic environment. It's not a pegmatitic environment at all.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you.
There was an iPhone question. I don't know if that's Peter Lickberg or not.
Okay. So this is, the question is, I'm not very good at looking at chat and giving a talk. The difference between Paraiba, Paraiba-like, and copper bearing. So if you go by the Laboratory Harmonization Committee handbook, for the gem industry, and these are gem labs that get together and decide on the appropriate terminology, they have allowed the term Paraiba to be used for any copper bearing tourmaline where the color is caused by copper or copper and manganese. And you can determine this by chemical analysis or spectroscopy. So sometimes the beautiful indigolites from Orongo in Namibia almost look Paraiba, but they're not. So Paraiba was the name that was used for the Brazilian copper-bearing tourmalines from Paraiba State. Paraiba-like was used for the two additional tourmaline localities in Mozambique and Nigeria. But if you want to go by the Lab Harmonization Committee, you can call those Paraibas. And then copper bearing, it's the same. It basically tells you that by chemical analysis or spectroscopy, you know that there's copper in the crystal structure. Does that help?
Barbara, I have a follow-up question on that, if I may ask. I would imagine, and I guess I'm asking for confirmation, are tourmalines from Paraiba State, if they are of equal size, color, and perceived value as a similar tourmaline from Mozambique, would the ones actually from Paraiba have a higher market price than the others?
Absolutely. So from my speaking with gem dealers, hi Mark, that the tourmalines from Paraiba State, especially the unheated, although it's very difficult to tell if they've been heated, but the high clarity stones from Paraiba State are worth 10 to 100 times as much as the Mozambican. To me, the most of the Paraibas from Brazil are much more saturated in color, but the Mozambicans are also beautiful. But that's why there's a lot of work on provenance of Paraiba tourmalines. So there's an issue of Gems and Gemology that came out in winter of 2019 that has an article on how you differentiate Paraiba tourmalines from Brazil to Mozambique and Nigeria. The Nigerian ones tend to be more, there are a lot of greens, and the Mozambique unheated can be purple. But yes.
Is there a responsibility among gem dealers to accurately disclose the location?
They don't have to, but most people do want to have a grading report done with provenance if you're buying a $50,000 a carat Paraiba.
Of course.
I would.
Okay.
Be good.
Okay. Just for the sake of continuity, please forgive me, but we're going to have to close off this particular questions. And if anybody has any other questions, we can ask them at the end of the whole panel, if that's okay. I'd like to proceed, if I may, to our next presenter. Barb, can you blank for us? Thank you. Our next presenter is of equal worldwide prominence and respect in the world of gems, and particularly the world of tourmalines. That is Dr. Federico Pizzota. He's from the University of Milan, and I'd like, Federico, if you could pull yourself up and open up your screen. Thank you. So we'd like to welcome now Federico to talk about some very famous locations he's very familiar with. And I'd like you very much to share with us your knowledge, your pictures, and your excitement about tourmalines. Federico.
Thank you, Ray. And I'm very excited to be here to participate to this online conference. And I really thank Barbara for having advertised the conference in Elba Island, Tour 2021, about tourmaline, which would be the third conference on tourmaline. Okay, I try to share my screen. I hope not having problems, technical problems. Please tell me if you can see something and if it is fine.
Yes, that's all good.
Everything fine? Okay. Just a moment. Okay, is it fine? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so when Ray asked me to speak about gem tourmaline from various locations, he told me, I would like to speak about Elba Island and possibly Madagascar. And I was a little bit confused about what I can speak about. And I was thinking, why not Congo? Why not Mozambique? And at the end, Ray told me, yes, good, speak about Elba, Congo, Mozambique, and Madagascar. So actually, it is a lot of stuff. I don't want to run across picture by picture about speaking fast about the different localities. I decided just to give some major outlines about each locality, trying to focus to some of the major gemological features of each locality. So let's start with Alba Island. I have here our planet. We can see the most important locations for gem production, gem tourmaline production across the world. And here is Elba Island in Europe. And after we will move to this locality here down in Congo. And from Congo, we will go to Mozambique here, Mavuko area, and here Madagascar. So let's start with Elba Island. Elba Island is famous for being probably the oldest locality for nice tourmaline mineral specimens. And actually, the area was discovered at the end of the 18th century. And it was, the island remained productive for over 150 years up to the end up to the beginning of the 20th century. And after there was a long period in which there was no more production. And thanks to some research I did in the last 30 years, I was able to discover a new pegmatite which could compete with the old classic ones, which recently produced in the last 3 decades, produced some nice stuff. Obviously not in the quantity of the historic mines. In any case, I have here a picture of San Piero in Campo. This picture belongs to the turn between the 19th and 20th century. And here, this is just to show you where the pegmatites are located. Here you can see the locality, which is known as Masso Foresi. And here on the back, where there were several pegmatites in which there were found 4 big pieces which were named the 4 evangelists, which are now at the Florence Museum, Mineralogy Museum of the University. And here on the back, there is a trench which is going from this boulder up to the bottom of these houses, and this is the Fonte del Prete mine, which actually stopped at the beginning of the 20th century because the pegmatite was extending below the houses. So now the place is recovered by gardens and so on, but the pegmatite is still there, but nobody would be able to mine because it is below the houses of the village. And here are some nice examples of historic crystals. This is an exceptional crystal for the time. The discovery of this crystal was documented in a manuscript of 1881. And this crystal is now in the Florence Museum. And you can see the typical colors of Elba Tourmalines. It is very important to notice that the name of polychrome gem quality polychrome tourmaline from Elba Island was named Albite by Vernati in 1913 in a publication. So the name Albite is named after Elba Island. Actually, it is necessary to say that Elba Island is one of the few localities, not the only one in the world, in which one locality has two mineral names. One is Albite and the other one is Ilvite, which is not a tourmaline, it is a different type of scarred mineral, but Ilva was the ancient name of Elba. So Elba has two mineral names at it. And the colors, you can see these are the typical colors of Elba Island tourmalines, which are in general pastel colors. And very rarely here is a cut gemstone from Elba. The color is getting up to some kind of reddish. And here it is a very interesting vertical study of tourmaline crystals from Elba. And Barb described the possibility of having several mineral species in Albite with the same color, or for the same species, you can have different colors varieties. And here is a nice example in which you can see a crystal from the base to the top, from black to greenish yellow, or quite yellow, and light pink up to quite colorless up to the top. And here there are some gemstones cut from this section of the crystals, and the lowest, intermediate lowest section, and some crystals cut from the upper sections of the crystals. And if you look at the mineral species from the base to the top, you have a shoal at the bottom. After you have albite. Here you have a manganese-rich albite, which is going up to the species silicite or fluorsilicite, which is a distinct mineral species, which actually is giving in some African localities the color variety named canary tourmaline. And indeed, the Elba greenish, yellowish greenish tourmaline actually are very close to the appearance of the canary tourmaline from some localities in Africa. And after you have a fluoralbite in this section, and you have the termination of the crystals, which is rosmanite. So when you study this group of cut gemstones, you can have a composition ranging from albite to manganese-rich albite up to silicite. And when you analyze this kind of cut gemstones, you have in general fluoralbite and rosmanite. And this is already some kind of information about Elba. Let's move to another locality now. We go from Elba here up to Congo. This picture belongs to a publication made in 2011, and Congo was already mentioned as a locality for tourmalines. Nevertheless, Congo became very popular in the tourmaline gemstone market a couple of years ago when a new mine was discovered close to Rubaya. Rubaya is located close to Goma in the extreme northeast part of Congo at the border with Rwanda. It's a wild place, very dangerous place, very close to the natural park in which the gorilla are protected. And and it is a quite difficult place for buying minerals and gemstones. I don't want to speak a lot about this locality, even if I have quite a lot of experience, because I have a project going on this mine since 2 years. Actually, nobody is able to go to the mine. No foreigners are able to go to the mine. Everything is made through the help of local miners and local people. So my experience belongs to what I can do from Goma and from the nearby village of Rubaya, but the mine is a very dangerous place. Nobody can go, at least till now. Unfortunately, on last Monday, the Italian ambassador was killed right close to Goma, about 30 kilometers far from this mine. This is a really dangerous area. And you can see the mine, which is a completely messy operation made by thousands of local workers mining for gems. And time by time, in the middle of the gems, it is possible to collect some nice crystals. Unfortunately, everything is broken off from the matrix, and the cavities containing the crystals are completely destroyed directly at the front of the excavation of the pits. So no way of having the mineral specimen that many mineral specimen collector would like to collect, would dream. And these are the typical colors from this locality. Actually, they are still in general quite pastel colors. And belonging to the first analysis I made, most of the compositions, if not all the compositions I found, belong to the Albite and fluor Albite species. And you can see that most of the crystals are polychrome. The very light colors are, in any case, used by the gem dealers as a material to be irradiated to get a better saturated color in the range of pink and red. Otherwise, there are some significant gemstones of a pinkish or reddish color, and there are these unusual yellowish colors, this greenish, and this brownish actually is just related to the pleochroism. If you look through the axis, this is a nice pink. Gem dealers know very well this. And here are other examples of the colors of tourmaline from this locality, in which there are this light pink, which actually can be nice already like they naturally are, or they could be the origin of gemstones which later are irradiated and transformed to more saturated color. And this kind of green, which is quite bright and nice, but in any case, I have not detected any strange or unusual element. And till now, I believe, with the data I have till now, I believe that this is only related to iron and possibly combination of iron and manganese. Okay, and this is all for Congo. Let's move to Mozambique, Mavuco. I have some experience in this locality. I am involved in a mining operation. Mavuco, actually in Alto Ligonia, is the famous locality in which there is the alluvial deposit of multicolored tourmalines, including Paraiba. And this is a picture showing the ongoing operation by the Mozgem company, and there is all the tourmalines still now are mined from the residual layer inside the soil of the area. Actually, there is the upper section of the soil which is removed by the excavator, which is named Kororo, and it is actually some kind of bauxitic and iron-rich soil. And below the Kororo, there is the so-called Kamada, which is the layer which has a thickness depending on the places from 5 centimeters to 30 centimeters, which can have the gem tourmaline. Actually, the concentration of gem tourmaline in the Kamada is around 1 ppm. It means about 1 gram of gem tourmaline for ton of material removed. And the Kororo, which is the upper layer of the soil, which can be from 50 centimeters to 15 meters, is completely barren. So at the end, to find this tourmaline, it is necessary to process huge quantity of the soil. And these are the plants, washing plants of the Mozambique company. And this is the sorting house in which all the wash material is passing through these belts. And the gemstones are manually picked up by the people working there. And this is the result of the picking up. And you can see different group of stones with different colors. All the stones are significantly rounded. It is not an alluvional deposit. It is alluvional, but the process of formation of this enriched level is something which formed over millions of years. So the stones are very rounded, and all the stones you can see here are copper-bearing stones, which can be heated for getting different level of intensity, green and blue Paraíba tourmaline. And I show you, in any case, what is the very best material for heating the material which is more enriched in copper, and it is this kind of material which, when heated, can give this variety of fantastic colors. Okay, let's move to Madagascar. I like to present the statement of Alfred Lacroix in his book Minéralogie du Madagascar in 1922, in which he was making the fantastic description of the red tourmaline from Madagascar, which at the time was really some kind of dream, because such a red tourmaline was not so common in the rest of the world. Actually, it was a real rarity, but in Madagascar, many localities which were listed here by Alfred Lacroix, Tandrocombian, Patsicatra, Mariran, Tsungumbaton, Zanabonoina, and so on, were producing tourmaline with a red color very close to ruby. And I just want to show you some view of the typical landscape of Madagascar. Here you can see a huge pegmatite outcropping in a morphologic evidence, and mining works in this pegmatite. And these are the dumps. This is another example. This is the famous Anjana Bonoina pegmatite, and this is the western slope of the mine. The northeastern side of the mine, in which you can see this kind of erosion, which actually are works made by the local miners, after the mine was abandoned something like 25 years ago. And these were the last operations which were made, in which the bulldozers were trying to unroof the hill, but after that there was some kind of bad event, and the mine closed, and the illegal miners started making this kind of works, and now the works are quite stopped since many years at the place. And here are works manually made by miners. Can you imagine to do this job by hands? But they are doing. And these are the dangerous pits in which sometimes you have to enter to inspect the veins, and in which the stones are found. And now I want to show you some typical examples of Madagascar tourmalines, and the gem material is collected from the different sectors of this kind of multicolored crystals. Sometimes the crystals are really multicolored, sometimes are multicolored, but maybe only in the range of the reddish color, so different intensities and so on. So in general, the crystals are not homogeneous, but they are such large that you can cut a nice, you can get a nice flowless portions inside from which you can cut your stones. And these are other examples of typical multicolored tourmaline. These are other examples. This left crystal is already close to 5 kilos, so you can understand the size of some of these crystals. And this is an example of the color varieties of the tourmaline from Madagascar. And look at the saturated red color of the left crystal, which is some kind of unbeatable red color, or close to, or in any case, very rare color. And here are other examples, in this is still in this range of color. And I did not mention something which is absolutely important, is that most of this red color is fluorlidicoatite, but exceptionally there are some crystals which have the same color, but they are Albite, but in general it is fluorlidicoatite. And this is a proud miner here on the right, which discovered here at the surface in one of these small works, this wonderful crystal, which is something like 6 centimeters tall, multicolored. And these are again other example of these crystals. And other example. Here I put 2 examples which are very important. This is on the left a fat crystal which is close to 2 kilos in weight, and here on the right is a small crystal which is something like 80 grams. And these are belonging to the same pocket, but they are coming from 2 different generations. This fat crystal is rooted deeply in the walls of the pocket, and this right crystal actually is the correspondent of what sometimes miners call pencils, late stage generation crystals growing here and there around the fat crystal, which indeed are rooted on the sides of the pockets. And here I wanted to show you what can happen, an interpretation of the color zoning of these multicolor lidicoatite crystals from Madagascar. Here on the left, you have 1.5 kilos lidicoatite sliced from Anjana bonoina sliced, and here you have an interpretation of the colors zoning inside. And here on the red you have a pencil in which they are more or less the same colors, but in the same sequence, but with a pattern which is depending change because of the different size. And so I move fast because I am running out of time. This is an example of a giant crystal, which this was over 30 kilos crystal. These are other examples of these slices, and this is a section 34 centimeters across of a crystal originally of 85 kilos in weight. And this is an example of the multicolor crystal, but all in the range of reddish color with the greenish triangle to the bottom, still Anjana bonoina. And this is the bottom section here on the right of this big crystal, which is 34 centimeters across and over 11 kilos in weight. And this is the gem wrath you can collect from this crystal, which is the typical material from Madagascar, which is the most desirable one in the market. So thank you for your attention. And here I'm in front of a big pocket, which was discovered, the result of a big pocket discovered a few years ago.
Thank you very much, Federico. Wow, that was exciting to see some of those crystals, and the color saturation was amazing. Do we have any questions, please, for Dr. Sabota?
I do, Ray. Federico, how much of the red gem lidicoatite actually makes it to market? I don't recall ever seeing a lot of cut stones in, say, Tucson.
Good question. Good question. Actually, a very high percentage of everything is produced in Madagascar since several years is going to China and disappearing the Chinese market. And if not China, Hong Kong, and this kind of markets. There was a lot of 40 kilos of nice gem material, which was cut in something like 3,500 nice cut material, which was cut in Brazil, and it was in any case traded back to Hong Kong. So the best market for this material is China, is the Oriental market in this moment. And this is the reason that the so poor material is arriving on our market. Actually, I can tell you something which is very important, is that this material you have seen is completely natural. But unfortunately, on our market, this material is suffering the competition with irradiated material mostly from Brazil and from other localities. And the irradiated material is more homogeneous, maybe has a little bit more purplish color inside, which is maybe a little bit more lovely. So at the end, people is not caring about natural irradiated because there is no distinction till now about this material in the market, in the laboratories. And at the end, this material is traded in the market, and we have mostly the radiated material on our market.
So is that a question, Mike, in the hopes that you might be able to get a hold of a nice piece?
I want some. That's why I asked, because I've never run across it, you know, at the Tucson show in all these years. And you know, from one of those photos, it looks like there's quite a bit of gem rough, but why isn't any making it over to here? Now, a follow-up to that: does any of this material show up at Munich?
Yeah, actually, if I speak about big crystals, we have another issue. Most of the big crystals for the US market are considered too dark. And they say, oh, it is big, it is nice, but too dark, too dark. So a similar crystal from Brazil, and I speak about Jonas mine, worth millions. And for this material, you have to fix the value on the gem value of the rough, which in general for these big crystals is ranging from $6 to $15 a gram, which means $6,000 to $15,000 a kilo. So at the end, a 10 kilos crystal, instead of being like the Jonas mine, 1 million, it is 150, which is still a lot of money. But when you have to compete with the gem market, sometimes the gem market is able to absorb much more material than the collectible market. And if there is a chip here, a defect there, people, there is a problem. So sometimes the big crystals is better to smash in the rough material, sold in a lot and finished, which is very sad, but this is the market now.
Yeah, I think we have to bring this to a bit of a close. I would comment, though, that my own experience in Tucson, my previous supplier, I asked him why he was no longer bringing good gem pieces back from Brazil, and he said, why would I bother? The Chinese buyers come right to the mine, they pay 3 times world price in my hand, and so why would I bother bringing anything to Tucson? So I think this is the beginning of a different way of doing things. The Japanese used to do this before, and now the new money is coming from China. So I think those of us in the market who like to have nice tourmaline crystals need to sort of possibly go to Hong Kong or Bangkok to try and catch these things in the East, because that's where they're all heading as far as I can tell. I'd like to personally thank all the presenters. Thank you very much for the work you did to put together your presentations. Thank you in the audience, those people who endured all this almost an hour and a half or more of program tonight. And this is an excellent way of learning, not just about the gemology of a mineral, but also some of the geology. And I hope it wasn't too complex or difficult to understand. And I do thank you all for your contributions. I
Right.
would.
Sorry,
that-
just quickly, we still have Clemens who's got a couple of photos to show.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Okay.
Thank you. But before we get to Clemens, who's going to screen share some nice pieces he has, I want everybody to be aware that next month on the 28th, the last Sunday of March, we'll have a program that is based on the family of beryls, with the exception of emerald. So all the beryls except emerald. So I think that will be a very interesting program. And it, of course, will also involve pegmatites. So we will, I think, have another lesson on pegs. So now, just to move forward, our last presenter here is going to show us and share with us some pictures of very nice tourmalines. Would you please screen share with us, Clemens? Can we get a verbal on that too, Clemens?
Yeah, okay. Everyone can see it, hopefully. So thanks for giving me the time for a couple of gemstones. We had a lot of minerals, and when I realized who all the speakers are, I thought maybe I can present a couple of stones and talk a little bit, just 1 or 2 minutes on the cutting of gemstone, or on the cutting of tourmalines, which is a little bit different than anything else, because the tourmaline has one property which makes a cutter giving a headache, for example, because the long axis of tourmaline very often has a different color than the AB axis, which sometimes is a nice accent, but very often it's just dark and it's black. It's the so-called closed C axis, which gives us the need to cut tourmalines in a very different style than other gemstones. And what I've seen on the world market is a lot of, I have to say, poorly cut, especially these Mozambique Paraiba tourmalines. They all cut for weight and not for beauty. So I just give you a couple of examples of nice tourmalines. Here we have start from the back, and in Brazil, some Jonas mine tourmaline. To the left is a specimen of 5 centimeters, and to the right is this wonderful color, which I would say you can identify out of a parcel of 100 reds. You can identify this light purplish tone of the Jonas mine tourmalines. Also a typical color, and we talked about these Paraiba colors, which are not due to copper bearing tourmalines. This is Namibian tourmalines from Neuschwaben mine, and this is the classical style. You very often see these elongated emerald cuts in tourmaline. Why is this the case? This is because of the crystal shape of tourmalines. Very often you have these triangles, you have these elongated triangles, and you get the best recovery in just cutting an emerald into these pieces. But if you want top quality and top reflection, sparkling gemstones, you have to invest a little bit into the yield. Get, instead of 90% of the possible yield, only maybe 50%, and you get wonderful, nice patterns from the stones. Staying in Africa, I would say one locality that has not been covered too much is Nigeria, and Nigeria is also one of the countries that produces wonderful dark red rubyllites, and they're famous for the bicolors, the green and red bicolors. So you have here the rough and the 2 stones I cut from these in 17 and 13 carats, so they're not small at all. And what is very interesting about these multicolors, 2 or tricolors, whatever you call them, some people say, yeah, it's tricolor because it's a color that's sewn in between. Those are really rare because the chemistry is changing here in this position. And as the chemistry changes, also some factors like the density are changing, and you have a lot of cracks, and there's a lot of stress in tourmalines. And very often if you cut tourmaline, there's this thing happening. You put it after a day of work onto your polishing lab, and it just smashes. It builds up a lot of internal stress that again needs for some special cutting skills for the cutters. And even the world's best cutters, they lose a tourmaline out of 10 or 20, let's say. So not the easiest material to work with, but still it's quite worth the time that we have. What's really coming up in the couple of, I would say, last 5 years is the Congo material. So the Congo, I've never seen anything that is that shiny and has this wonderful saturated but still subtle colors. So this is one of these extremely green tourmalines. I have to admit, I did not analyze the material, so I cannot comment on the trace elements that we have here. But if you see these materials in person, they're really extremely shiny and sparkly, like nothing I have seen in tourmaline before. There's a couple of others. These orange colors very typically can form these wonderful, deep saturated orange stones. This is a small stone of 1.3 carat, and it has a very high intensity. But also yellows can be found in large sizes. Still in Africa, a couple of ovals I cut here from Londonai, Tanzania. This is maybe one of these canary yellow tourmalines that we already heard about. And also interesting is the locality of Oyo in Nigeria. This was a rough stone of 70 grams, and I cut not only this gray one from out of it, but that was gray, green, purplish into pink in one and the same stone. Color suit us one. Something that's a little bit stranger, and something I have worked together with Steve and a couple of others here, is the Commander Mine tourmalines from Nadunchukin. Those are drevites and a little bit of mixture with uvites. And the color here is not due to chromium, as most people assume, but it's mostly due to vanadium. So we do have chromium and vanadium present, but vanadium is about 10 times the concentration of the chromium. And also here, we have some cutting rough material available, and the largest sizes here are from cut stones in the 2 to 5 carat range. On the right side, this is also close by to Tanzanian mine, but in this case, it's a chromium tourmaline. You can see there is not much difference just in the optics. You cannot tell the chemistry by the color, and this is one nice example where you have mostly vanadium here on the left side and mostly chromium here on the right side. Speaking of strange colors and strange chemical compositions, we go to Mozambique. And this is unfortunately not Paraíba, Mozambique, but these are tourmalines that have a very high concentration of manganese. And the manganese here goes up to 8%, at least in my measurements. And we can see a stone to the left, which is unheated, which is the trivalent state of the manganese. And the manganese can very easily be reduced by heating them to 2 bivalent manganese, which is almost colorless. So the right one is a larger stone, and it was heat treated, gently heat treated, and you can adjust the color by different techniques of heating. Unfortunately, those will never turn blue because the copper is missing or is just below 1 ppm. And another one that very often can be misinterpreted in the direction of copper-bearing tourmalines are the Paprok tourmalines from Afghanistan, especially the old findings. You have here a nice crystal. About 50% of this crystal is gem clear and more or less a gem rough material. Here a small cut stone of about 1 carat, and this almost Windex blue color here in the larger one. And Afghanistan, of course, is also known for the multicolors. So a little bit pale photo here, but we have a green, white, and a pink tourmaline. So this is just something I wanted to share with you, how cutting can be done on tourmalines and the wonderful material that we have. Also, it's extremely hard to teach. Thanks, Barbara, for some nice slides you showed me. Maybe I can make it easier for my students, but at least for cutting, it gives me a huge pleasure from time to time to have these nice tourmalines on my labs. Thank you. If there are any questions for the cutting, please go ahead.
Can we take down this? There we go.
Yep,
okay.
here it is.
So thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Clemens. I don't know, are we getting any questions on that?
I have a question.
Of course. Go ahead.
From the experience of a gem cutter, is there any possibility of predicting from a piece of rough the occurrence of tension inside the pieces of rough which could create problems during the cutting process, or it is just something which is happening sadly?
It is happening sadly, yes, but there are some indications. What you see on the outer surface of the tourmaline, if there are some very shallow cracks, you have to remove this material. So the core usually can be used, but if you do not do the preforming properly, then these cracks can elongate into the material and split the crystal apart. So preforming is essential, and there are some secrets in the trade, like it's not really a secret, but some people recommended to use warm water for cutting to remove the thermal shock when the cold crystal approaches the lab. But in general, even if you have the cleanest of all materials, sometimes they just split away, especially if you're cutting long shapes.
Thank you.
So that's it. That's a wrap, I think, everybody. And thank you very much. Thank you, Jolion, for your technical support and your support in terms of the Zoom platform. I'm hoping we'll have a little bit more communication before the next one.
I've just posted the link for the next meeting, the Zoom link, in the chat. It will also go on the GemDat page tonight, and obviously Ray will be mailing that out to those of you who Ray has got the email details for.
So we can all look forward to the next program on barrels, with the exception of Emerald, and I hope that we'll see as many of you as we can, and perhaps you'll tell some of your friends just how good the programming quality is. For those who persevered, thank you for staying with us, and I'm going to close the program now, and look forward to seeing you all again in a month.
Thanks,
Ray.
everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Jolyn.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks
And
again,
thank
Ray,
you-
for
thank
setting
you,
this
Ray,
up,
thank
and
you, Ray.
Jillian for supporting it.
Yeah, and thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you.
I already said that, but I'll say it again. Thank you to all the speakers. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves.
We did.
It was great, Ray. Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse.
Bye, Jesse. Bye, Brian. Bye, Ray.
Hope we'll see you all
care,
in
Bob.
Tucson or someplace like that sometime soon.
I hope so. And Federico, I hope so.
God, yeah.
Or Tourmaline 2021.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Julian.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
now.
It's a Sunday, Pierre. Sunday, the 28th of March.